Hello, everyone. Welcome to the League One Lowdown. We're a little bit closer to the season starting, obviously, here on the Deck Network. As I say, Sam, a little bit closer. I'm joined by Sam and Callum. Sam first, how are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very excited to get, I keep saying it, but a little bit closer to the season. It feels like that is. Everything's really gearing towards sort of August 10th, that weekend.
Yeah, it's just was it 20 days to go now? It still feels a long way off. It's just dragging through that final bit of pre-season, isn't it? That nobody really cares about. Everyone just wants, because last year it was obviously that week earlier, wasn't it? And we're just praying that it speeds up now. Get the competitive
Definitely.
games going.
Someone who definitely doesn't care about pre-season. He went on holiday during pre-season. Callum, how are you?
Not too bad. In defence, Lincoln did the same thing. They went on holiday. So I feel like everyone's doing it now. They're just going on holiday, and as much as the clubs try and tell us they're taking it seriously, and I have no, I'm sure they aren't taking it seriously. If you're telling me you're going to the south coast of Spain and not having a piss up at least 2 out of the 5 nights that you're there, then you'll no. Come on, stop. This
No.
is it's League One football. It's not.
Well, Lincoln were doing warm weather training. I'm assuming you were doing some warm weather drinking while you was over on holiday.
Less said about the Coke and the rum, the better. I may have sent a few messages into the group chat that aren't ripe for repeating.
Well, I'm sure we're going to get out to some of those topics as we go through the podcast. We're sort of a bit like we did a couple of weeks ago, talk about sort of the state of play with transfers and kits and a few miscellaneous bits like ticket pricing and the Sky Sports deal. I know someone on the podcast has got some thoughts about that. And unfortunately, Seb isn't with us. He's sort of away on a project with the BBC. We've been big leagued by Seb. So he's away, unfortunately, for this one. But he'll be back as we get that little bit closer to the season. So we're going to start with some questions. Sam, you put out on Twitter, on X, asking for questions. And we've got quite a few in. So we're going to start with one. If you're watching on YouTube, they're coming up on the screen. But what will Lincoln do about the Tyler Walker situation? Obviously, Tyler Walker picking up an injury not related to the injury that kept him out for the majority of last season, but he's out for 3 months and up. I think Michael Scabala said. Callum, it's a big loss.
It's a big loss, but I mean, it's one that I think is kind of being over exaggerated in a way. I think people kind of saw Tyler Walker as the natural. I mean, I don't want to say a replacement to Joe Taylor because Joe Taylor came in as Tyler Walker's replacement in a way, but I don't. I think Lincoln have got the firepower. You know, Ben House, Rob Street has come in. We've seen the likes of Jovan McCarmer and Freddie Draper who are able to do a job. And on that note, Freddie Draper's come back from his summer break looking like an absolute tank. So there's no bets as to who's going to do the heavy lifting. In terms of that nippy pace striker, I do think Lincoln could do with that, especially if they continue to play that 2 up front. That's kind of been their way that they've played towards the end of the season. I can see them bringing in a striker in that sort of in that Walker mold, but I don't think it's the end of the world if they don't. I don't think with the 2 sales of Jensen, it kind of stems to a wider Lincoln thing with the sales of Jensen and Sorensen. Lincoln really can't be expecting to push for playoffs or automatics. I just don't think that's feasible. So I don't think it's the end of the world if they don't bring in a striker. I'd love to see a striker. It's always exciting when your club signs a striker, but I don't think they'll be rushed into a signing. Maybe a lone striker from one of the top teams would be great, though.
I'm sort of with you on the most part for that in terms of expectation. I can't see this team sort of getting playoffs with sort of, obviously they got so close last season, but they've gutted the Joe Taylor obviously on loan. Mitchell has gone back to Millwall and then on to Charlton. Obviously Sorensen to Huddersfield, Jensen most recently to Millwall. They've lost a lot of the key ingredients of that team. And Tyler Walker, like you said, he was the one sort of in the summer that was touted he was going to replace the goals that Joe Taylor brought in the back end of last season, and he's already gone down with an injury. So it's a really difficult situation for them. I think I'm a little bit more pessimistic than maybe you, Callum. If you don't see it as much of a problem, I don't see where the goals come from. I mean, Joe Taylor, what do you get, 10 in that that back end half the season, sort of gets your times that up. It's 20 for the entire season. I can't see where these 20 goals are going to come from that strike force, to be honest.
I think Lincoln did a great job of sharing the goals towards the end of last season. Like, it was almost like every player had their turn at scoring the goals. We saw what was it? The main one that comes to mind is Moylan. No one would have expected him to come up with that brace. I think it was Barnsley, wasn't it? So Lincoln did a great job of sharing. Of course, Taylor was the consistent one, but there were I don't want to say there were very few times when he made the difference, because him as a player was the huge difference. But in terms of like that end output, Lincoln did a great job of sharing the goals last year. But I do think, we're getting to that point of the transfer window naturally where Premier League clubs are more eager to shell out their players on loan. And I do think there's a striker or two. I mean, Premier League clubs and Championship clubs will see what Lincoln did with Joe Taylor last year. And, that will put Lincoln probably further towards the top of the pile in terms of lower league clubs that Premier League clubs might be looking to put out their players too. So I think it's not one that Lincoln will feel like they have to rush into. Is probably, you shouldn't expect to sign it within the next week, I don't think.
Yeah, I'll bring you in, Sam, because obviously Jovan Makama is someone who scored a couple of goals in pre-season. I guess sort of all too well what he can do with his last-minute goal against Leyton Orient for the last season. Sorry to bring that up, but do you see him as maybe being part of that solution in terms of scoring the Joe Taylor goals this season coming?
It's a big ask. When he got obviously one goal last season, you're talking you're going to need a 20 to get into the playoffs. You're probably going to need a 15 to 20 goal a season striker. I don't think Ben House is that player. I don't think Rob Street is that kind of player. I think Rob Street is in the same mould as Ben House, and they will interchange. Freddie Draper, we know he scored goals at, I think it was Walsall last season, so possibly he could step up and score the goals. But on Tyler Walker, it's such a shame, a player who 5 or so years ago was really highly thought of at Nottingham Forest and was a player that I personally really, really liked. So it's a really difficult one for Lincoln to try and replace.
Definitely. And sort of speaking of replacements, one of those replacements sort of Lincoln have needed to find is at right back with Lasse Sorensen moving on. And he's obviously gone to one of the teams that have come down from the Championship. And our next question is in similar vein with the 3 relegated sides, obviously Birmingham, Huddersfield and Rotherham. Who do you think is going to do the worst? Sam, I'll let you go first. I think it's a difficult question, this one, because they're 3 of the sides that they're going to be up there, aren't they?
100%. I'm not going to say Birmingham. I know I tweeted out before the uproar on Twitter when I said it'll be so happy when they don't get promoted. But I think realistically, I think they are going to get promoted. So please calm down, Birmingham fans. Rotherham have always done their business early and have big Steve Evans in charge. My only concern with Huddersfield, and I'm going to say Huddersfield will do the worst, I don't think they've overhauled their squad enough. They've got Evans, they've brought in Lasse Sorensen, but there is still a losing mentality culture in that squad for the last 3 or 4 seasons when they've been really poor. I don't think there's been enough of an overhaul to take that losing culture out of the club. So I'm going to say Huddersfield.
I think I'm in line to agree, Jamie. I don't know about you, but Birmingham have just been if Birmingham don't win the league, then I don't know what's going on. And Rotherham, they know, I don't want to say they know the division, but they've spent the most time in this division out of the 3 recently. So they'll know what to do to be at least at the top of that engine. Huddersfield, it might just be, I don't want to say a trial by fire, but almost a trial by fire, effectively.
I mean, you mentioned Rotherham know the division. Obviously, Steve Evans was in the division last year, and they've signed a couple of players from that Portsmouth side that obviously won the league. I'm sort of agree with both of you. I think Huddersfield will fare the worst, but in that, I wouldn't be shocked if these were the 3 teams that got automatic promotion. It's I feel it's something that could happen, and to see the 3 teams all go straight back up, I wouldn't be shocked at all. So they've added a lot of firepower to the league and a lot of sort of a bit top heavy, isn't it? The league with so many big teams. But who else do you sort of see in that mix, Sam? If Huddersfield maybe aren't going to perform as well as the other 2, who do you think is going to sort of be up there alongside them?
Charlton. with Nathan Jones in charge, definitely. They've recruited really well. Yes, they've lost Alfie May, but they've signed Gassan Ahadmi, Matty Godden, and then obviously Alex Mitchell as well. The experienced Luke Berry's played under Nathan Jones before. So I would definitely say Charlton. We can't discount Peterborough with the development. They seem to come really strong in the second half of seasons. I think that'll be your top 5, to be honest.
Bolton have got to be up there as well.
I'm waiting on Bolton. I know they've added goals into midfield. I'm still not sure on Ian Evatt, personally. I think they'll score goals, but I still don't know if they're going to be strong enough defensively, which is risky to say. But they're obviously losing in a playoff final. Teams they react differently, don't they? And
before we go on to the next question, dare I throw Wrexham in there?
Just they are bad.
But the pure momentum they've got has got to see them. I was just throwing that we don't need to have a discussion. I just felt by saying the word Wrexham, chaos would ensue.
It's a fair point though, because the amount of depth Wrexham have in their squad. I looked through their squad the other day. They've got 2 goalkeepers that do arguably start for 60% of League One. And then you've got Paul Mullin what I will say is Paul Mullin is untested at League One, because obviously he got promoted with Cambridge United, didn't he? And then left to go to Wrexham. Ollie Palmer is not good enough for League One, but you've got Elliot Lee. You've also got Sam Dalby, who's untested at League One, and is sort of like a player that drops in. But then you've got Andy Cannon. And I'm going to say an outside shot for top 6. Bristol Rovers. They are my wild card for the season, Bristol Rovers, just purely because I think some of the business they've done is really, really good, and I quite highly rate Matt Taylor as a manager.
It's going to be interesting, isn't it? Sort of who's going to be there or thereabouts. We'll move on to our next question then, and that is, who is the best signing of the window so far? I mean, the graphic's got a picture of Alfie May on it. Is it Alfie May? Sam, you're shaking your head. Who do you reckon it is then?
It's another Birmingham player. It's Mark Leonard, who signed, this morning as we record this. The fee is rumoured to be around £500,000, and I personally think that's an absolute bargain. He can easily play at the Championship level. If you look at his stats from last season, he's one of the top performing in terms of defensive attributes, in terms of possession attributes, and he's not bad going forward either. I just think for a complete package of a midfielder, you can't really get much better for £500,000. We'll know the level as well, and availability as well. Started all 46 League One games for Northampton Town last year. So I'm going with Mark Leonard in terms of value for money, and the sort of type of player he is.
He stole my thunder there. I was going to go for Mark Leonard as well. I mean, I think he's someone I seem to talk about a lot last season in terms of just sort of how good he was in Northampton. And I was always quite impressed by that Northampton side, and he was the main reason why, really. So to say he's got a permanent move as well was the bit that shocked me, because I thought probably a loan would be expected, but he's gone on a permanent deal to Birmingham, and it's a cracking signing. They've spent the money, but they've spent it well this summer. I'll try and win back those Birmingham fans you upset on Twitter, Sam. But
I tweeted out about Mark Leonard yesterday when the rumour was going around. I said they've got one of the best midfielders in League One, and I got them back on side, so we're okay.
Fantastic. I'll go with Mark Leonard with you, but Callum, are you going to make it a trifecta, or have you got a curveball to throw us?
It's a good signing. There are 2 that I've looked at, and I'm just kind of like, okay, one of them I think is, I don't know how it's happened, and that's Fiorini to Stockport. Because this guy, according to at least, according to online sources, he's rumoured to be worth over 1.3 million quid. Yeah, he signed for Stockport. And he was on loan. He was on loan. Was it 2 years ago? He was at Lincoln, and he wasn't obviously he wasn't the best player on the pitch, but he wasn't horrendous. Like, he didn't look out of place at all in that Lincoln side. So if he can get firing at Stockport, that's a hell of a signing, a permanent signing as well. Like, fair play. The other one
is
Michael Appleton's favourite footballer, isn't he? He signed him at Lincoln, at Blackpool, at Charlton. He's booked the trend now.
I still like, it's one of them that looks so good to be true, at least from a value point of view, that you're just like, how has that happened effectively? I think City must have some sort of buyback on that or whatever. Like if he starts going through
Or
the
a
leagues
sell
or
on,
whatnot. Yeah. The other one's Promise Omakire to Bristol Rovers. Bit of a light spark in I think it was Fleetwood side last year. And he looks like a good bit of business that's gone there for a fee that's apparently at least double his market value, but still. These young players that manage to stick in the divisions and make a foothold, I could see him doing quite well. Part of that Bristol Rovers perhaps upset that Sam's predicting. Whether that happens or not, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with those. I mean, they're really good suggestion. Fiorini's an interesting one, isn't he? I'm always a little bit. You never really know with sort of players that have got a bit of an injury record, but if it comes off, it'll come off a lot. I think that's one of those. It's going to go one way or the other, but I think it really could be a good signing. And our next question is about another signing. This one, Lincoln, with George Wickens, who recently obviously signed for Lincoln, the goalkeeper from Fulham. It's a question from our friend Cornell. Do you see George Wickens getting 20 clean sheets and winning the Golden Glove this season? Obviously, Lucas Jensen got very close to the Golden Glove. Did he get 19 clean sheets? It was. He was one behind the lad that I forgot his name. The lad Derby who got the Golden Boot.
No, Will Smith.
Yes.
Yes.
And he was. So he got very close to it. Will Wickens go one better? Do you think?
No. That's the short and sweet answer. No.
Right, next question, please.
I just think your defence in front of him is not as strong as it was last year without Alex Mitchell. Powdy O'Connor. Is it Powdy O'Connor? No, he's gone. One of your centre halves.
O'Connor's
O'Connor's
one of them else was obviously rumoured to leave as well. And if that happens, you've
O'Connor's. There's rumours, isn't there? But it did seem like there were no clubs named, and it was one of those Championship clubs are interested. It seemed a lot like
a bit of money in
agents.
His contract,
yeah, that seemed what that one was.
But yeah, I just think the defence in front of him is not as strong. And we don't know how good George Wickens is compared to Lucas Jensen. Is he as commanding his area? Is he good at coming for crosses? And in certain games this season, he will be bombarded with crosses and tested like that. And we don't know if he can stand up to that. So I'm going with no.
Yeah, I think it's a risky one in terms of sort of him as a player rather than sort of if he's going to get the Golden Glove, because they've done really well sort of recently in terms of signing goalkeepers. Over there, Carl Rushworth the season before was fantastic. He's gone on. He was at Swansea, wasn't he? And then obviously Lucas Jensen last season. So they've got a good track record recently, but obviously it is that little bit improving, like you said, Sam, and it'll come off. Potentially, but if it doesn't, it could be a bit of a mess, really, because that they've let go of 3 goalkeepers and signed 3 goalkeepers this summer. So there's been a big turnover in the goalkeeping department at Lincoln. And Callum, where do you sort of fall? I guess I'm a little bit cautious, but are you a bit more optimistic on Wickens?
I don't think I'm as critical as Sam. Do I see him getting 20 clean sheets in the Golden Glove? No, but I do see him being a good goalkeeper. I mean, you only have to look at, I don't want to say his progression, but his only 2 loan moves were Wealdstone and then to Ross County. That level of progression, going straight from non-league football and then going straight to Scottish Premiership football. I think he saved a penalty or something against Rangers and Celtic or something like that.
Did it something like 16, 17 saves against Rangers? It was the most saves in a Scottish Premiership game, I think.
So, to have that record, I'm not saying the Scottish Premiership, especially the lower half of it, is necessarily the best quality in the world. But what I will say is that Lincoln know what they're doing with goalkeepers. As you say, Jamie, Lincoln have got this incredible record recently with bringing in goalkeepers. And there is something about him. He's young, he's tall, and he seems to have, at least judging from what he's said in the media so far, he's been the one pushing for this move. He could see that obviously Fulham are a stable Premier League team now. He's not going to get his chance there, at least not for a while. So he's pushed for this move. He knows what Lincoln can expect. So one thing I don't imagine will be missing from Wickens is that lack of effort. I think he'll have plenty of I don't know, desire to improve it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. And sort of, I guess on the other end of it is obviously Lucas Jensen moving on to Millwall. I guess touch briefly on that. Uh, what do we sort of think of that move? Because it was one that sort of caught me a bit off guard. I wasn't expecting him to move on after Sorensen left. But he's got that move to the Championship, and it looks sort of a good deal for him and a good deal for Millwall, sort of capturing one of the best in League One.
Yeah, 100%. I the 2 games I watched him play against us last year, he was outstanding. I know at the start of the season there was some criticism of him, but I the 2 games I've properly watched him, he's been outstanding. Fully deserves his move to the Championship.
He's a great goalkeeper, and I think the money is a no-brainer. You have to take the money, especially Lincoln. I don't want to say Lincoln have become a selling club, but it feels like that's what they are. But I feel like most League One stable clubs are selling clubs. You have to be the I don't know.
Yeah,
the infrastructure's not there to not be a selling club at this point.
It's the only way these sort of clubs survive.
100%.
So
yeah. And I always feel it's a bit of a shame, I guess, for the fans. You sort of you get so attached to a player and then you see them go. But it's that model, isn't it, that's always talked about with Lincoln using the example. It's the transfer model that they use. It's been like a Peterborough as well. But next question is it's a little bit I guess more of a fun one. We've got so what are the elements a club needs for the perfect away day? What do we think of that? I mean, it's there's a lot of good away days and there's a lot of bad away days. I mean, I did one at Stockport last year, which was a very fun away day. That was sort of a proper classic away day, sort of in the away pub, police escort to the ground, 1-0 loss in the last 5 minutes. I mean, it was a proper away day. So, but I think Sam, I know you do a lot of away days, don't you, Sam? So yeah, what do you think?
It kind of depends what type of person you are. If you like a drink, then you need to have a good pub around the ground or good beer cell inside the ground. There needs to be I kind of like an old school ground, so I look at the Portsmouths and stuff like that, old school proper football grounds. You have to have the noisy section of the home crowd next to the away fans because that creates the atmosphere. So I'll use Orient for an example. Our noisy bit in the south stand is right next to the away fans in the east stand, so it creates an atmosphere. And then obviously winning. That usually helps an away day if you're travelling 6 hours in the pissing rain and the freezing cold, and you lose 1-0 in the 90th minute. It's horrible. But yeah, that's probably what I would say.
Yeah, I can go along with that. The winning that's you can still have a good away day, but it surely it can make a dreadful day amazing, can't it? If you sort of pick up a win in sort of an awful ground, you go in like places, obviously League Two, but Gillingham, if you get that away end, obviously open to the elements and the temporary permanent stand they've got in that away end, it can be awful, but you win 1-0, it doesn't matter, does it? So
I don't know how they've still got away with that.
No, it's unbelievable, really, isn't it? Callum, have you got sort of thoughts?
I mean, so I don't go on away days really. I'm normally trapped in a radio studio looking after things. Looking after things. But I think for me, the 2 main things. One, on that note, good Wi-Fi. Just please don't have bad signal so that commentary doesn't crash halfway through. As long as technically media.
God, name and shame.
Barnsley, do one. Just do one. The other thing, when I do go, the main thing, food. Have good food and have interest in food. Just different food.
So I'll use us as an example. And Lincoln. So Lincoln have got that nice food court behind one of your stands. That was brilliant because you could literally have anything you want. You've got every option you could possibly want. And at Orient we do pie and mash, which is like a proper East London thing. And to be honest, that's quite nice. So.
The one I always put needs to be near a train station because I don't do sort of the coach trips. If I do an away day, I go on the train, so it has to be walkable from the train station. That's my only requirement for away days.
I don't trust Ivancy West Coast mainly, so I usually just get on the coach.
Well, I think this one is quite close to this train station. Our next question is related to Peterborough. I think you can see it as you go into Peterborough train station. You can see this other station. So, do you think Peterborough United can go again after losing so many star players? I mean, they've lost a lot, haven't they? Johnson Clark Harris obviously gone to Rotherham, Mason Clark to Coventry. I guess that one was agreed before, but obviously that came in the summer and they've been gutted a little bit of their star quality. But it's the Peterborough way, isn't it? They bring up these players and sell them on. But Sam, I'll go to you first. What do you think?
I don't see they have a track record of just being a top 6 League One club, don't they? Regardless if they seem to never get promoted, and if they do, they're back the next year. They're still going to have firepower. You got Chris Clark, Abraham Ado from Harrogate. Defensively, they really need some centre backs. They've got the left back from Crawley Town, who I watched in the playoff final, who I thought was really, really good. Adebisi, I think his name is. But they've lost Ronnie Edwards, they've lost Josh Knight. So they kind of, unless they've got anyone coming through that I'm not aware of, they do need to sign a couple of centre halves. Otherwise, they are going to be like their last pre-season game where it was like 6-4 every single week. And eventually, teams will work out how you attack, and you're going to need a solid defence. Titles and promotions are won by keeping the ball out and clean sheets near enough. And if Posh can't do that, then no, they won't. But I think they'll get top 6 just purely because of Darren Ferguson mainly. He has a habit of just being the Peterborough man, so to speak.
Yeah, and it looks like Harrison Burrows is going to Sheffield United as well, I guess, to add to that. We'll sort of reveal, I guess, where we think they're going to be placing the table when we do our sort of predictions in our next episode, the last one before the season starts. We'll sort of put the different teams in respective different sort of positions on the table. Callum, do you sort of agree? I think I'm in the same boat, similar to Sam, in terms of it's a bit of a mess they've sort of got with so many moving, but you never know, it can always go well for them.
I don't want to say sometimes you get just the status of the club carrying it. We kind of see, to an extent, at a bigger level, Man United, just the name of Manchester United intimidates other teams. I'm not saying Peterborough United are anywhere near Man United's level, don't worry. But like,
shivering in our boots because Peterborough are coming to town.
But do you know what I mean? It's a big club for this level. They are established. They're a big, consistently playoff fighting, if not champion, title challenge inside. And if you're a Stockport, like, as much as the fans will give it the big hard one, their players are going to be not intimidated by going to Peterborough, but it's a big match for them. So that it kind of what I mean is like it's not going to be easy for them, if that makes sense. But I think just the status of them being Peterborough should see them through all right.
Next, we've got this one again is quite interesting. It comes with a little graph if you're watching along on YouTube. Why do you think we have seen less loan signings this year? The most loan signings is your club, Sam. At least so far, Leyton Orient have made 3, but a lot of clubs not making any loan signings at all. I mean, including Lincoln, Callum, who obviously have made loan signings, and we talked about a couple of loan players they've had just last season. So, Sam, I guess you're on the top end of this table. So, Peterborough, not Peterborough, talking about Peterborough, why have Leyton Orient not continued on the trend that we've seen a lot less loan signings?
I think it's about being smart in today's market. You've got the clubs at the top end of the league, your Charltons, your Boltons, who, to some extent, like your Stockports and stuff like that, who have larger budgets than us, and we can compete for the same players. I'll pick Lewis Bate out, for example, who's gone to Stockport. If we wanted Lewis Bate, we wouldn't be able to offer as much money and probably as long of a contract. So we have to be some clubs have to be very, very smart with the business they've done. And if you look at the 3 loan players we've bought Charlie Kelman in from QPR, who's played with us before, and off the bench, really, really good. I quite like him. Sonny Perkins has a points to prove. He's been in and around first teams, but never really made his stamp on a team. So he comes in previously of our academy as well. So has the know-how of the area and stuff like that. And then we got Zach Hemming from Middlesbrough on loan, who got into Europe with St Mirren last year, and all we've seen is rave reviews from St Mirren. So I think it's about using the market properly. Clubs like Birmingham and Bolton, Charlton don't really need to use the loan market because they can afford the players. I am surprised Lincoln, Stevenage, Mansfield haven't opted for that strategy, but I think Premier League clubs, especially at the moment, and to some extent Championship clubs, aren't letting their younger players go because they're actually playing in pre-season because of the Euros that's just finished. Players are still on holiday. So clubs like Arsenal, Spurs, Chelsea won't be as willing to let them younger players go and probably until the middle of August when their players are back and fully fit. So I think that's at the moment why you haven't seen so many loan signings, purely because the club don't want to let them go at the moment.
Yeah,
I think I'll follow up on that. Just like that, like Lincoln don't obviously Lincoln need the signings, but I think what a lot of clubs are kind of thinking now is let's sort our players out, let's get our key positions sorted, and then we'll have a look at the market afterwards. Then we'll be like, crap, we've got limited budget. Where can we splash the cash on loans? And it is clever because as you kind of see as well with Premier League academies, there's to the level now at this point where they're just like getting that League One, League Two experience almost doesn't really seem that necessary when they're just they're playing whenever they want in the academies. So I think we'll get to the point where those numbers do go back up to a more normal level, just because we'll get towards the end of the transfer window and Premier League clubs will be like, okay, let's send a few of our players out, and League One clubs will be like, crap, like in Lincoln's case, it might be crap, we need a striker, or crap, we need a left wing back. And that will happen, especially I think in Lincoln's case. That's also, I don't know every single club's situation, but Lincoln have adopted, and I think it's a fairly widespread approach of get as many of our own players as we can, then find the loans to plug in the gaps. And I think that's becoming more commonplace.
Yeah, I sort of agree with both of you in terms of it. It's just early. I think the question maybe needs us so far, because as you get closer to the season, and obviously the transfer window doesn't end when the season starts, so you've got that time after the season kicks on that you can for these loans to come in, and obviously not League One, but Gainsborough Trinity, who are in non-league, sort of speaking to their manager a little bit, and they have the same sort of idea in terms of that they've built their squad, and then they will add the loans when teams want to give them out, because they're not ready to release people on loan yet until you sort of know your own situation. So it's an interesting one to keep an eye on. Maybe that trend will stay by the end of the transfer window, but I guess we all sort of think it won't. But we mentioned managers, and our last question is related to that. Who are the top 3 managers in League One? I mean, this is not an easy question, so I'm going to give myself some thinking time. And Callum, I'm going to give you the difficult job of going first.
Is the question who are the top 3, like it's written there, the top 3 managers in League One, or is it the top 3 League One managers? Because I feel like they're almost different questions. Like to me, they're completely different questions. Like, I don't like Steve Evans. I think he's
not even with the hat on we've got in this picture on screen.
Not even with that hat on, I don't like Steve Evans. I think
he lasted 33 minutes before it kicked in.
Like, I'm not hugely enamored with his style of play, but he is a quality League One manager. He's a terrible manager in League One. So I think they're slightly different questions. Darren Ferguson for me has got to be up there. I think he's proved it at this level. He's great at this level. I also want to throw. I've not when we've seen these online. I've seen Ruben Sellers quite low down. What I will say is, with what he did, with all the crap that was going on at Reading last year, he's a great manager. He's a great man manager. Whether tactically he's that good, I don't know. Narrowing it down to a top 3 is very difficult, because I know that whatever I say, I am going to be shat on. So I think as a nod, I mean we're only going off 8 months pretty much. But I'm going to go Skubala in 3rd.
Of course you are.
Mate, criminally underrated. Skubala in 3rd. We'll go Darren Ferguson in 1st, and I'll plug the gap annoyingly with Steve Evans.
I mean, this is difficult, isn't it? I think I'm sort of caught in this.
Difficult.
In the similar place to you in terms of sort of not going for the best managers. You want to go for the ones that are best in the league. But I think sort of balance both. Steve Evans has to be in there, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Because of how good he is and in this division. I mean, his biggest hater, Callum, even admits that himself. So I'll stick Steve Evans in mine. Maybe Steve Evans has to go first. Maybe that, because he's so good in League One. I mean, maybe that's a little bit too generous. I always go to bat for Nathan Jones, so I'll have to stick
Yeah.
Nathan Jones in my three.
Yeah, no, he was on there. Yeah, he was on it.
And then sort of picking a third. I mean, Ian Everett's obviously done such a good job at Bolton, but has missed out on promotion a couple of times. Darrell Clark's got a chance this season. Darren Ferguson, I'm always a little bit apprehensive on because he got us promoted when we in Doncaster. We got us promoted into League One, but we needed like one win to secure a league title for the last few weeks of the season, and we just didn't do it. And we ended up finishing, I think it was third in the end. So rather than getting that title, we got the little mini trophy for finishing third. But I think, maybe it has to be in there. I'll Darren Ferguson. I'll think of a third. Sam, do you have maybe a more concrete three?
I've got Nathan Jones. I've got Steve Evans, and I'm going down the Callum route. I've put Richie Wellens in there.
Thank God you've done that, so I don't feel like I'm putting Skubala in.
That's worse than putting Skubala in. I think Richie Wellens.
What I will say is, you have to bear in mind, you've got Gary Monk in this division. I think he finished top half of the Premier League, but we're not even giving him an eyelid because. But then,
He's been away for.
If we'd have been doing this, 6 months ago, and we'd have said that Darren Moore would have been in League One, he'd have been probably in the top three.
Yeah.
But he got relegated with Port Vale, so these can change in an instant, as is the very up and down nature of League One.
I think sometimes with certain managers, you just need to look at the type of player they've got as well. Some managers have, and in certain games, it's shown how they want to play, but they can't do it every week because they just don't have the players. So someone like John Brady, for example, I think he's quite underrated. He got every ounce of quality out of the Northampton team last season. But then you've got people like Gary Caldwell as well, who at one point were all calling for him to go, and Exeter City finished comfortably mid-table. It's an incredibly hard thing to do, but I'm sure maybe on Twitter we'll each come up with a list and I'll put it out and then we'll see how much abuse we all get.
The one thing I will say, I know he's not managed a game yet, and I hate to say it because it's a team that I hate, but Mark Robinson at Burton Albion is probably building a very handy squad at the moment. So he must know something that we're all being thick about. I don't know what is going on at that club right now, but they're operating annoyingly good.
Yeah, they've signed 19 players, haven't they?
So it's just that might come back to bite them with how many players he's signed, but he's not even managed a game yet. But I just want to throw his name into the conversation because something's going on at that club.
I think for the sake of being different, I'll go for Ian Everett then, so that he can be my third. I've got to stick Nathan Jones first, just for my sort of loving with Nathan Jones on our review podcast last season. I've sort of got to carry on with that, and I'll stick Steve Evans second, and then Ian Everett to round it out. But that brings us to the end of our questions. I'm sure sort of during the season we'll carry on and doing these questions because they get so thank you everyone for the responses on Twitter for those. We've got a couple other bits and pieces to talk about. I know, Sam, something you especially wanted to talk about was ticket prices. A lot of clubs obviously revealing those ahead of the season starting. What are your thoughts on that? I know you've got some things to say.
So first of all, I understand from a club's point of view, I completely understand they are losing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 million pounds every season, and they need to narrow that gap as much as possible. I understand that. But we live in an age, and not every League One ground, like clubs like Charlton and clubs like big clubs with grounds, and they're never full. They're never ever full. So why not put the ticket price at £15 for adults and maybe a tenner for under 18s? Try and get people. Surely bums on seats will generate more revenue because they'll pop in the shop, they'll buy, I don't know, a key ring or something, and you're generating more and more revenue that way. Where if you're pricing tickets, and I'm going to use Orient as an example because I know what they are, for a Category A match, which was, off the top of my head, it was Charlton, Wrexham and Birmingham. And so we've got Birmingham, third game of the season. We are charging Birmingham fans, if you buy in advance, £34. £34 for a third tier game if you buy in advance. If you did what I did 10 years ago and you just rock up to Brisbane Road on a match day, that would cost you £37. A category, we have then a Category AA, which was them games, and a Category A, and it goes down to about 32. and then a category A or B game where it goes down to about 28. I personally don't feel League One football should be more than £25. That is your top limit. We are talking third tier football, and I'm going to use Burnley, for example. They're charging, I think, Portsmouth adults 44 or 55 quid. That's just ridiculous. And we're getting to an age where we're just pricing normal people out of football. West Ham did it, for example. The big thing about going to that new Olympic Park was to bring ticket prices down to keep families going. And it got released, I think, a couple of weeks ago. They're not doing under 18 tickets anymore, and they were charging £85 for West Ham United versus Aston Villa. We are getting to a point where we are treated as a customer and no longer a fan. But from a club's point of view, like I said, I can understand they need to narrow that gap of loss. But ticket pricing, there needs to be something done, because in 2 years' time, if we're carrying on this same rate of increase, nobody's going to be able to afford to go to the football. Or we go down the route, everyone's going to have to buy a season card to actually attend the games, because a season card works out roughly, 13, 14 quid a game? That's reasonable. But if you want to just go by the odd chance, let's say you and your two kids want to go to a game, you're going to be looking at 70, 80 quid now, because that includes food as well and your travel. It's just not viable in today's world as it is at the moment. It's just not viable. And football is kind of that break. I think it's pretty much the national sport, and we are alienating so many football fans because nobody can afford to go. And from the Premier League, it stems from the Premier League charging the audacious pricing. And one club I know that does it well in League One is Huddersfield. They do not go over the top. And I think their adult prices were £249, one of the cheapest in League One for an adult. I know they're dire, and they have been the past couple of years, but they do it the proper way, and they're not treating fans as just people who will always just pay it, because there will be fans that just pay the money because they want to go to the football. We can't be treated like that. I personally don't think.
Taken advantage of, isn't it?
It's taking advantage. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. And I just it really winds me up that we're going down a route of we're going to become like a tourist sport in a way, and there's not proper fans, which then ruins the atmosphere. And it just winds me up, because when people we're all of the age of probably going to look for a house in the next couple of years. How the hell are we going to afford a season ticket to go to the football, which is probably your break from work and the other crap that is life? But no, we're not going to be able to go.
I think it ties into the other thing we're going to talk about with the Sky Sports deal and that sort of thing. I mean, it ties into this idea of guaranteed income. We're in a world which, obviously, through whether it's government, cost of living and whatnot, it's a much wider topic than three blokes sat in their bedrooms can solve, right? But clubs need guaranteed income. They have so much guaranteed expenditure, whether that's through player transfers, just running costs, training facilities, ground costs, whatever. All of that is guaranteed outcome. But their income is so varied. It depends season to season on sponsorship deals, on performance in the league, on TV rights now. It's so up and down. And this is what we're saying with Lincoln. They're pushing this idea of a membership, which, fair enough. I'm sure Lincoln are the only club. I'm sure every other club is doing exactly the same thing, because they want that guaranteed income. If they get your money at the start of the year, say you give them, like you say, 300, 400 quid at the start of the year, then they know that they've got that money. They don't have to keep on begging for you to come back each year, each week. They know that whether they lose or whatever, they're going to get that money for the year, and they can adjust appropriately. So that's why for the clubs, this Sky deal is great. Sure, because it guarantees that income. Like you say, it guarantees, I think it's 12 times every club will be on Sky Sports, which, is great. I'm sure there are people who live in parts of the countries, whether they've moved with their family, that they'd love to watch their own club on Sky Sports. And that is something that we've never really seen before. And great, it's going to become more common. But unless that money, I would have been fine with the Sky deal, like you say, if it meant that for the fans going to the game, it was cheaper. But people will see this Sky deal as the reason that fan attendances are going down. the real fans, regardless of whether it's on TV, if you're telling me that only because Lincoln game is on Sky that the attendance is going to go from 8,000 to 6,000, it's not going to happen. Lincoln will still get 8,000 plus people in a match day. If the results are going well or whatever, Lincoln will still get 8,000 people. That's just it. That's Lincoln's fan base. Whether they choose to watch that on TV afterwards or record it or whatever, I don't think the Sky deal is going to change it. What will change is the ticket pricing. If if a mother and father or whatever, like a parent, sees that their ticket price for the four of them to have a day out every month or whatever goes from 100 quid for four of them to 120 quid, 130 quid, that's going to be the first thing to go. And then immediately it becomes, oh, dad, you take the kids, and the mother sits at home and does whatever, or the dad sits at home and does whatever. That's how it'll. And then you kind of see it break down, and then football becomes less of a family sport and more individualistic, and then you get into all sorts of different things. The ticket price really is just the top of the iceberg, but it's something that it ties into everything, and it is a shame to see that it becoming less of a, I don't want to say a family sport, because heaven forbid we hear some of the chanting on the terrace. It's not great. And obviously I'm lucky enough to do in the job that I do, I get to listen to Lincoln City for free every week. That there is that opportunity for me, and I'm incredibly grateful and lucky that I get that opportunity. But heaven forbid if someone's struggling to put food on the table, and they've been like you say, whether it's a Huddersfield fan, a Birmingham City fan, or a Stockport or Wrexham or whatever fan for their whole life, and they see their ticket price has gone up, I don't want football to be the reason someone can't put food on the table. Do you know what I mean? Like, it genuinely might be getting to that level. So I don't know. It's obviously a difficult subject, and one that without the actual facts and figures we can't solve. But it's difficult.
Yeah, it's an important discussion to have, isn't it? And something that sort of should be talked about, I think, a little bit more than it is, in terms of how impactful it is for football fans and sort of your everyday football fan, that ticket price increases make a huge difference. And I mean, I use sort of the example of the club obviously I know the most about, with Doncaster. I mean, I got, because I'm at university and doing all the other bits and pieces, going to Lincoln games or whatever, I have it's a flexi game ticket, where at the start of the season I buy a 10-game ticket, and then I, during the season, pick my 10 games as I go along, which I think that's a great sort of idea, because I know I can't get to most games of the season, but I can guarantee that I'll be able to get close to 10, or at least close to 10 games in the season. And that works out cheaper for me, and it obviously gives that guaranteed money that you were talking about, Sam. So I think that's something sort of like an idea, initiative, and I'm sure other clubs do it, but something that Doncaster do that I think is something that hopefully the sort of thing that's seen a little bit more widely. But Callum, you mentioned the Sky Sports deal. That's sort of our next talking point to come on to. And I guess they do tie in, don't they, in terms of the ticket prices pushing people away from going to games. We'll obviously see if that sort of is the case. And the Sky deal, I think it's sort of in the similar vein. So you get to those winter months, it's cold and it's dark and your team's losing, and the option is you can watch it at home in the warmth and on the telly, and you're playing in the Carabao Cup or whatever, or you can go to the ground and you can pay the 20-25 quid to go and see it in person. That I think that becomes a very difficult situation to persuade the majority of people, or at least everybody, to stay going to the games. And I understand why it's been done, and like you mentioned, Sam, it's obviously good for the clubs in that they have that guaranteed stream of income at the start of the season with the deal, and they're on TV and everything. But I don't think it's, for the majority, I don't think it's fantastic. And I don't think who's watching these as a neutral. I mean, one of the ones at Lincoln City, they're playing Wigan. I think it's in September, and that's been moved to 12:30. I mean, if you're not a Wigan fan, if you're not a Lincoln fan, who's watching that game of football? I mean, it's because it's not an appealing game for people who aren't the fans of those teams, or fans of teams around them in the table and that sort of thing. And that sort of thing is the bit that confuses me, in that we're moving games to different times. I mean, Doncaster have one on a Thursday night, and it's bonkers, really, because there's no consideration to the fans in that sort of respect. And you're moving games around for this mystical casual fan that is going to watch every League One, every League Two game that's put on the telly. And for me, I don't think that person exists.
I think it's going to affect away attendances more than anything. So, if I pick a game from last year, it costs £32 for the coach. I think it was like 38 for the train. Match ticket was 25 quid. You're then going to buy something there for something to eat, whether that be your dinner or just something in the ground. So let's say that's 10 quid. You're looking at 70, 80 quid to do an away day in the middle of the country, for example.
And you drink as well. It's sort of on like an away day, and that's what you go to the pub and everything, and it really adds up.
So I think we'll see away attendances probably drop first, especially for the smaller clubs like Orient, like Lincoln. I don't think you'll see it as much for clubs like Birmingham because they've got fans all over the country. It's the smaller clubs where the fan base is a bit more localised, I think, especially for the further away trips. Obviously, you have your hardcore lot that will go no matter what. But I think, especially in the winter months, you might see just your away attendances dwindle. Home attendances, I'm not so sure on. I think it all depends on the kickoff time. If they're going to start moving them to like the Thursday nights, for example, I can't go to Thursday night home games. So that's one less bum on seat, so to speak. People have work and they may have to start early. And I don't have a problem with games being moved to 12:30 and 5:30 on a Saturday. That's just my opinion. But if they're going to start being moved to Friday night, Thursday night, potentially even Sundays, that is become. We're not Premier League. You're not going to get 20,000 people watching it through Sky Sports. You're going to have about at least, probably at most, 300 to 400. Because let's face it, Sky subscriptions aren't cheap either.
No, definitely not.
I think the big thing for me is it stops the reliability of football, doesn't it? Especially at this level. The reason I stumbled upon that point was it was from a selfish point of view, really. I enjoyed going to work at 12 o'clock, doing the football, dealing with the post-match stuff, and then leaving at 8 o'clock. That was my rhythm. That was my Saturday. And now all of a sudden it's, okay, I have to be up early and get to work for 10. Or, don't worry, you've got all of today to do nothing, but you're not going to be home until midnight if we've got an evening kickoff. And then I was like, well, hang on, I'm just one person. What about the fan going to the game? Or what about the family watching the game? Even if it is at home, you want to be able to... I always remember just switching on Final Score as a kid. Or Soccer Saturday or anything just like that. You knew at 3 o'clock you'd have some football on. And okay, that'll be the case, but it might just be League 2 football this time. Or it might just be a few games in League 1. The best thing about it was always having pretty much a full Championship League 1, League 2, and half of the Premier League games at 3 o'clock on a Saturday. And you knew that would be the talking point at dinner over the fish and chips before, I don't know, Strictly came on or something. That was childhood for me, and that was childhood for a lot of people. And, maybe it wasn't strictly for some older people watching it or whatever. But that's the thing about football that we liked, was that come 3 p.m, for the next 2 hours or 90 minutes plus half time and added time or whatever, you could just forget about school. You could forget about your 9-to-5 job. You could forget about everything that happened, because for the next 2 hours you're watching 22 blokes and a referee run around a bit of grass kicking a inflated pig bladder. And that's what we loved about football, because we do it with a pie and a pint. But now it's at like 12:30. Who really I'm not having a pint at 12:30. I'm too boring for that.
You've lost me there, Callum.
But you know what I mean? It's
5 o'clock somewhere.
It's not the same attitude.
Yeah, no, I understand what you mean.
Reliability, and I think that's the big loss. Obviously, attendances might be down, but just the atmosphere. Imagine if you're I don't know who's on an Exeter fan, and you're in I don't know, Fleetwood, and crap, we've just lost 2-0. Well, Fleetwood not in this division anymore, are they? But do you know what I mean? You're an Exeter, you're in Stockport, whatever, and you've now got to track 5-6 hours home. The match finishes at 7:30. You're not going to get home until 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. Who wants to do that? No one wants to do that. And you can only say, well, it's football, I'll do it for the lols so much. You can only say that so much. And I think that's where I draw the line.
Yeah, no, I think, again, like we sort of said with the ticket pricing, it's another interesting and sort of important conversation. I think that the sort of impact this has on fans is a part of it that maybe hasn't been thought about as much. But we'll end on at least a funny note, if not a positive one, and we'll have a go at Barnsley for their kits. We'll end on that. Because
dear.
for anyone who hasn't seen them, and if you haven't, where have you been? They are hideous. I mean, the home kit it's pure red. There's no sort of trim or anything. The away kit is the murkiest grey. It's like 50 Shades of Grey on it. It's sort of just a bit awful. And then the third kit is the brightest highlighter Barbie pink you can imagine. It's a goalkeeper's kit. That is the third kit for them. I mean, it's a shame Seb isn't here in person to sort of hear us sort of slate his club kit, but I know he wasn't best pleased about them either. But they managed to get worse than that American one they had last season. Thing.
Who managed
to get it worse.
Who's designing them? They're not even good.
It's just like a template kit, isn't it? I want to know who actually approved this, because as far as my knowledge, they go to the board for approval, and the board are just going, "Yep, we'll have that one."
That'll do.
Idiot has signed these kits off.
It's almost like if, FIFA, if it had like a create a team mode, which I think it now does. I haven't played FIFA in ages, but it just came up with here's one kit, and it's just like plain blue, and you're just like, this is something out of FIFA 98. Come on, I know we all take the piss out of the modernization of football, and okay, maybe some Premier League second and third kits are designed with the sole intent of him wearing them with jeans, but they've it's hard to say they've even designed this
They
kit.
all
look like training shirts.
How much it is?
They won't be cheap, will they? But yeah, they all sort of the home kit looks like a training shirt. The away kit's just like it looks like a cloud. It's dreadful. And then the that pink one. I mean, the less said about that, the better. I mean, I don't mind sort of garish, out there colours. I mean, we talked about it last time with those Cambridge kits. I was calling it the Wetherspoons plate kit. I love it. I think it's fantastic. And their kits, because they've really gone for it, they look great. And we've got a picture on screen. For sort of the
they get worse. They get worse. They're charging £55 for that template.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Oh, hang on. No, it's not just a basic template. You've got some stars at the top.
I was going to say, give them a bit of credit. They've put.
Oh, I apologise. I'll take it all back.
They've put 15 dots on it in an organised fashion. Jesus, Lord above.
And Puma, it's quite a shame because Puma have actually made some really nice kits this year as well.
Yeah.
But this one's just dire. All three of them are horrible.
Yeah. Is it the worst kit in the Football League?
Oh.
Well, I'll leave that as a question. Can we leave that as the question to come back on? We'll start it next week. We'll just
leave them on a cliffhanger.
Name a kit worse than Barnsley.
Yeah. Well, they are. So I'm happy to leave it on that cliffhanger. The League One Lowdown on Twitter. Give us the handle, Sam. Obviously, you're in charge. I'm making sure everybody knows you're the one in charge of the Twitter for the hate.
Do not send the Birmingham hate this way, please.
It's all to Sam. So, what's the handle, Sam?
It's League One at League One Lowdown. And I'm pretty sure it's with the word one. I'm just checking for you now because I don't know off the top of my head.
I think
it is League with the number one Lowdown.
Fantastic.
And if you want to send hate to Sam personally, his phone number is 07.
His PO box address is as follows. So any Birmingham hate, send that to Sam. Any sort of thoughts on the kits or anything we've said, sort of tag us on Twitter. Get involved there with commenting and see what you think. See if you sort of agree with us. Thank you everyone for watching, for listening. We'll be back before the season starts. We've got one more episode before the season kicks off where we will rank every team in the division, put them in our places on the table. I mean, we'll do a Crawley now. They're going to finish rock bottom. But the other 23...
I put them bottom. I've moved them.
Oh!
You could probably guess who I put bottom based on what happened last season.
Fantastic. So we'll be back before the start of the season for that. And follow us on Twitter. Listen to us. Follow, like, whatever you want to do on wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. And thank you, everyone. And we'll see you again next time.